Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us for our lunch keynote with Helen Carroll. We are thankful to have you at the University of Minnesota Law School, and we are happy to have our 2014 Distinguished University Teaching Professor Dale Carpenter to introduce Helen. Professor Carpenter is a graduate of Yale University and is the University of Chicago School of Law. He is a leading constitutional law scholar, particularly in the areas of First Amendment and sexual orientation in the law. Professor Carpenter is an often published scholar, both in the popular press and academic literature. His book, Flagrant Conduct, The Story of Lawrence v. Texas, is a top-rated book on Amazon. Thank you for joining us, Professor Carpenter.
Thank you. It is my pleasure and honor this afternoon to introduce the keynote speaker at this symposium, Helen J. Carroll. Helen is the director of the Sports Project for the National Center for Lesbian Rights, which aims to ensure that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender players, coaches, and administrators receive fair and equal treatment, free of discrimination. She is well known in the sports world as an acclaimed national championship basketball coach from the University of North Carolina at Asheville, and in fact was the first female coach to win an NAIA championship in 1984. From 1988 to 2000, she was the athletic director at Mills College, which is in the Bay Area. She joined NCLR in 2001 and now devotes all of her efforts to helping the sports world recognize that the inclusion of LGBT people diversifies and strengthens the sports experience. She works closely with major national sports organizations, including the Women's Sports Foundation and the NCAA. She has been a featured speaker on panels with Nike, ESPN's Outside the Lines, the New York Times, and many others. She is a co-author with Dr. Pat Griffin of the book On the Team, Equal Opportunity for Transgender Student Athletes, and the NCAA Guide for Transgender Athlete Inclusion. She is currently assisting state athletic associations around the country in adopting policies for the inclusion of their high school student athletes. Ms. Carroll is not a lawyer, I should say, but she works closely with the excellent lawyers at NCLR, and her accomplishments in fighting discrimination using a formidable arsenal of personal persuasion, experience, and law would be the envy of any attorney. Please join me in welcoming Helen Carroll.
Thank you, Professor Carpenter. I just want to mention that he is a big friend of NCLR, having written a amicus brief for our Tennessee clients, which you may recognize as being at the Supreme Court when we won marriage. So thank you very much for that. All of our lawyers said to be sure and tell you hello. So. You know, it's really fun to be here today. I just said that, I really think a symposium like this should happen at every law school because it's a huge area right now that is brand new and people don't know very much about it. We have impact cases at NCLR that we work with, and we can't do all the cases around the nation that are happening, so we work with attorneys in different states. And it's always a huge teaching experience because we find that the legal cases we have around LGBT sports are so new that we have to kind of convolute our way through any kind of law we can find and bend to be able to represent our clients. So As he said, right now you're going to be able to just listen to a coach and an athletic director who happens to be in a position where I get to be an intermediary with lawyers and the athletic world. And it works so well because I can kind of slide in there with lots of people that I already know. So they're not really, I don't want to say the word frightened. I'll say the word they would never in a million years let an attorney talk to them. So I can do it in a friendly way. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit today, we have the title of my talk is the present explosion of LGBT sports and what's happening right now. But to look at the explosion, we really have to see what was behind that and what made it happen. Because certainly in the last 5 years, everything has become very public, and part of that certainly is the frenzied media coverage and the public witnessing brave individuals come out. So those two kind of combined have really made for huge personal interest stories tapped into sports. So we end up in headlines in areas in the media that other subjects don't. So that gives us a real different way to look at this. So the impact is huge from the frenzied media. And I always say frenzied media because you never quite know what they're going to say. Even if you give a particular quote, it may come out very different than what you said. So let's take a look at a couple of minutes on kind of how we got here. I'm not really going to do a history lecture particularly, though the professor that introduced me put those dates out, which I wish he, could have, 1984, 1988, that doesn't even pull you up until the 90s. So those decades, I do have those decades. And let me tell you, I'm kind of happy about it because I can look back and see how things have moved, and I can see the losses that we've had, which can be very productive if you learn from those and move forward with that. So there's not a day that goes by that we don't have college athletes coming out in the news. The Outsports.com is an area that writes about these athletes that come out, whether they're high school or college, male or female, transgender. Their personal stories are out there every single day. And every one of those, when a public story comes out like that, every one of those influences tenfold other athletes, especially in that age group, to look and see if they have the support to come out. So that's critical. For our coaches and our administrators, it's much slower there. I mean, you really have two different types of movements here where you're talking about athletes and participants and when you're talking about coaches and administrators. But what's happening with coaches around the country now is that we have an organization called the Equality Coaching Alliance. So it's sort of a private group, and right now it's got like 250 coaches and administrators that talk back and forth to each other about how can we do this, should we come out, how can you support me? So that's another kind of background support that is happening that fuels this explosion that we talk about. So those are sort of a little bit of behind the scenes kind of stuff, but when you look at, of course, what really grabs the headlines is when your athlete like Michael Sams comes out. Or a Brittany Griner of the Women's National Basketball Association. Brittany's certainly even in the news in a negative way because she's, trying to get married and it's not working and blah, 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 blah. But of course, every bit of that is huge headlines. We have out women golfers now. I mean, that's pretty amazing when what used to happen was charm school and how to walk with the book on your head while you're swinging a golf club. And you think I'm kidding about that. I mean, just until the last few years or whatever, they really, really did that. But how did we get those open gay golfers right now? We had Babe Dietrichson way back when, that we knew about. Okay, when we look at football, when we look at Michael Sams, you wouldn't have believed the support system around him before he came out, really, really trying to figure everything out and see how it would work. But, that wouldn't have happened without 4 people before him. Wade Davis, Dave Coppay, Jerry Smith, Sarah Tawala, who I think is going to be here this afternoon. All of those guys, came out and were there to support Michael Sams when he came out. Okay, let's look at, in baseball, you got David Denson, who's in the minor leagues right now, but he's out. So how could he have been out if it wasn't for Billy Bean, Glenn Burke, Dave Pallone? I know I'm saying all these names, and if you don't know these names, you should look at them and you should know them. Because if we don't look at what happened back here as we move forward, we're going to make the same damn mistakes that have been made before. And so you've got to look at that and see what those people actually went through. So I have to mention the fact that even with transgender athletes or transgender people in sports, we've had the background of people who have gone through. And there are 2 particular people, I think, that I name that has made a difference in this area. One is Renee Richards, a name everybody knows. Everybody knows what she went through. Everybody knows that she didn't take over the tennis circuit. She was more of an average pro player than, she wasn't going to do good against Martina and Billie Jean. It's just a fact. The other person that really, the name may not be known as much as Renee Richards, but it should be, and I think it will be if we all keep looking at this, is Kai Allams, who was the first transgender athlete at a NCAA Division I school. Kai, are you in here? Stand up for a second. Stand up. Stand up. Kai, I hope you didn't mind me saying that. I didn't realize he was here until right before I spoke. But, what Kai has done is been able to give lots of young transgender athletes the knowledge that they can go through it and they can play. Of course, we have Billie Jean King, we have Martina, who have done everything for all women in sports, and I think men also. And they were brave enough to step out and take $1 to play on a circuit when they couldn't get the money that they needed from the men's circuit that had them in there. I have to mention Abby Wambach and Robbie Rogers from soccer. They're very present day, but they're the ones that you look at and you see them happy and smiling and moving in a great way in the world, and that's just a fantastic role model. The other I think historical group that I want to mention that has fueled this explosion, and I would say actually is the explosion, is the U.S. women's soccer team, an entire team with lots of out lesbian players and an out lesbian coach who just kicked butt everywhere. So you can't say that this was bad for sports. What you saw was a pretty phenomenal team